Coming up on this episode of the Elite Recruiter Podcast.
You've spent a lot of time around Tony Robbins. What are some of the biggest things that a recruiter can learn from Tony Robbins and like the Tony Robbins trainings that you've gone through?
There is so much.
Do you think NLP is something that recruiters should learn how to utilize?
I think recruiters should learn how to utilize any tool or skill that can help them, right? Okay. And NLP is a great tool. It's just a language of the brain.
Welcome to the Elite Recruiter Podcast with your host, Benjamin Mena, where we focus on what it takes to win in the recruiting game. We cover it all from sales, marketing, mindset, money, leadership, and placements.
I've actually been looking forward to this episode of the Elite Recruiter Podcast. My guess, recruiting wasn't his first career. And there's many, many career professionals out there that have gotten into the recruiting space and are just absolutely crushing it. And I think sometimes they're crushing it better than some of us that have grown up in this space. And I think the reason is because one, they've figured out their network, they figured out their niche, and they've honed this in as a business. And I'm so excited that I have my special guest, Brian Moskowitz, who's also a firewalker. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that too. But Brian, I just want to say welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Benjamin. Thank you for having me. As I shared before, I take you and your guests on my long runs with me, a couple times a week. So looking forward to this.
Awesome. So let's just get a quick started. I know that we're going to walk through your story, but what do you do right now as a recruiter?
So as a recruiter, I place attorneys in law firms in Florida, right? So picking a niche is a big thing. You can do in-house positions, you can do law firms. I do law firms. You can go by geography or by practice area. I go by geography. I'm a licensed attorney in Florida, so it made sense for me to place attorneys in law firms in Florida.
Awesome. And so I'm so excited about jumping into your story because I have so many questions. Everything from being a firewalker to a trainer for Anthony Robbins to you've been a lawyer in and out. You've been a performance coach for lawyers. So let's just dive in. How did you even end up in this wonderful world of recruiting?
So this is my second go round in recruiting. The first time, you gotta, go back in time 20 years. Living in New York, and that after 9/11, my then wife at the time didn't want to be in New York anymore, which made perfect sense, right? So we packed up, I sold my law practice, sold my house, and, we moved down to Florida and wasn't licensed to practice in Florida. So I got to figure out what to do. And knowing who I am, I knew I was going to buy a franchise, a business in a box. I'm really good at executing. So I was looking at, Merry Maids and Janet King and mailboxes, etc., and a gym. And there was one, MRI, Management Recruiters, which was a franchise. So I'm like, that's for me. So I bought the MRI franchise. I was placing at that time legal technology sales professionals. So people selling technology into law firms. And I quickly got divorced. That went south. Lost all my money, my house, all that fun stuff, and couldn't do contingency anymore. So I went back into the practice of law, knowing I could make, good money and get paid, for every hour I worked. So I did that for a while, right? Practiced, and I only did family law this time, right? Because I had to work my way through it, and help others. So my purgatory, whatever the word is. Then I went into peak performance coaching, right? I had a trainer for Tony Robbins. So I took Tony Robbins and what he does for the world. I took a sliver of that and I did it for attorneys. I had a business called Attorney Revolution. I did one-on-one coaching. I did CLE events. We did live events, no firewalks there. We did board breaks, right? I had attorneys doing board breaks, and that worked very well for a while until I got recruited. And I got recruited into Big Law, a firm, one of the oldest in the state of Florida, one of the largest in the state of Florida, recruited me to come join them to practice family law. I'm like, all right, let's give it a go. So jumped in, did that for a while, and then COVID. And during COVID is when I said, you know what, life's too short, not doing this, resigned my partnership, right, resigned as a partner, and I went into recruiting for the second time, which is this time. And being a glutton for punishment, I went back to MRI and bought a second franchise, right? Because I knew who the owners were at the time, and I had high respect for them, and I knew they would take us on a good run. They ended up selling since then, but that's another story. And so the second time in, which is now placing attorneys in law firms in Florida, And that's how I got into this wonderful world of recruiting.
Okay, so let me take a step back to when you like sold your law practice in New York, you get moved down, sold your house. You were looking at all these different franchises. Like being a recruiting franchise is like more hardcore sales than a gym or a mailbox, etc. Like, why did you choose the sales route over the, hey, let me just sit in an air-conditioned office and have people coming into my door route?
I wish I knew. If, during my journaling, I do a lot of journaling, over the years to figure it out. I think it was that significance within me as an attorney. I wanted to do something professional, right? And while, again, not to knock it, but a Janet King, a Mary Mays, those businesses are very successful, right? I just saw myself as an attorney, a professional, and I wanted to go into something professional. Should have picked a gym. That would have been the right way. But it's worked out this way anyway. So that's how I ended up picking the recruiting franchise.
So did you look at multiple other recruiting franchises, or was it just like MRI was the first one that you saw?
So I think I knew of Sanford Rose at the time, and I chose MRI, and we'll leave it at that.
Okay, on to the next question then. So you also spend time as a peak performance coach, and that's like a lot of like in-depth conversations that you're having with these lawyers that are like, you're coaching them, like you are going deep into these people's lives.
Yes.
It's almost like the perfect thing for recruiting. Like, how has that really impacted your relationships with lawyers in the recruiting space?
So I believe it has allowed, the peak performance part has allowed me to, I think, quickly determine whether someone is an A player or not, right? Or a B or B plus player. But even more importantly, to realize if it's the person or the team that they're on, right? You can have an A player and then they change teams and they quickly become a B player. Or the opposite, find a B player and then recruit them and move them and quickly they become an A player, right? So the team that they're on, the environment, the culture, the training, the mindset, I think is a big piece of that. But also, to your point, the drilling down and the questioning, right? Not accepting the surface answer. It was sort of easier with coaching because they were paying me a fee and they were open to answering my questions, right? Now I got to really sort of peel away the layers to gain their trust, right? Not that I did it before, but it was different. Now they don't know who I am when I first reach out to them, the attorneys, right? So it's building that relationship and then really getting to the core reasons of why they would consider a move and, then going why, and just drilling, till you get to the core root of the issue, pain, pleasure, whatever it is.
I'm going to even take a step further back before the performance coaching. So there's a lot of people that have reached out to me over the years, and I'm sure people have reached out to you that have no experience in recruiting at all, but they're highly networked in their space. They're doing great. They're looking at moving into the recruiting space. What kind of advice would you have for somebody that's looking at potentially making that jump?
So one, you got to go pro. You have to be a professional, right? When I first went into recruiting, I would say I was an amateur. And this is from the book, Turning Pro by Stephen Pressfield, which we'll get into later on the books. I was an amateur. Same as I was an amateur when I first practiced law, because I was raising my two kids. I had to structure my life around them, And when I first started recruiting the second go-round, my first deal was a 3-way firm merger, right? So it was a very decent fee. And one of the firms ended up leaving a year later, but, I'm like, well, this is easy, right? So I picked up the phone, called a few friends, made a 3-way deal, boom, done. So I may not have taken it as professionally as I would have liked, or I should have. But I quickly learned that, this is a professional business. You have to, get up every morning, get dressed, go to the office, plan your day, have your schedule, have it on your calendar, execute. My advice to someone would be, if you're going to do this, you're going to do this, right? You have to go all in and treat it as a profession.
Let's take a step back. So you said you approached
it.
Yeah, I love this. You're giving me this so much stuff. I'm having fun over here. But so you just said something I think that is absolutely key and was keeping a lot of people back. The difference between amateur and pro. And you just said that the first time that you approached it, you did it as an amateur, even though you bought a whole business. You bought a franchise. You had the coaching, you had the training, but then you decided to go pro.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about that difference between a true amateur and a true pro, and like what really made that decision happen?
So being an amateur wasn't working, right? It just wasn't working. If I didn't want to work, I didn't work. The income as a contingent recruiter, right? You'd make a fee and not make a fee, make a fee, not make a fee. So the reason I bought a franchise to begin with is for the structure and the consistency and the business plan to execute, right? I guess I had success too easy to start. I figured I knew it all, right? And then, again, I love reading books, Stephen Pressfield's book, Turning Pro, right? He's got a few, but that one, like, oh, damn, I got to wake up, right? This is a true profession. I have to treat it as such, right? No more, rolling out of bed, t-shirt and shorts, right? Get up, get it done. I'm in an office here. So yeah. Although I walk to work, which is pretty cool.
Oh, walking to work is like the best thing ever. I wish I could do that more often, even though I just walk downstairs. But I see that a lot of people, like when they jump into their own recruiting business, and it's almost like the things that I see that really separates the successful from the not successful. It's that structure and that accountability. Like when you're at somebody else's recruiting business, working a recruiting job, they tell you what to do. When it's your own business and you're at home by yourself, you're like, you know what? Do I have to make that extra call? Do I have to actually send that extra email?
Do I have to show up today?
Yeah.
I don't show up. Nobody's looking for me, right? It's not like the court is calling and saying, Mr. Moskowitz, trial was at 9:00. It's 9:30. Where are you? Right? I'm not at my desk at 9:00 making calls. Nobody knows.
And, in today's world, also like social media, you can spend all day on social media. Okay. And like now with this 2024, all these lessons that you've learned over time, like how have you become a better recruiter because of, you decided to go pro and among other things?
So making all the mistakes and going back to basics, right? There's all these newfangled tools out there, AI just being one of them. So it's just having a plan, right? Scheduling the plan, executing the plan, debriefing the plan, adjusting as necessary, starting again, creating the plan, scheduling, executing, debriefing, adjusting, start again. And it's just that cycle.
Okay. One thing I loved is MRI recruiters or people that have been around the MRI, training or programming. Planning is something different for you all. Like for many times, people that were in that structure, planning is like, here's my top 3 things I'm going to do today. For the people that are listening, what does planning for you actually look like?
So planning for me is probably a little different than the MRI. Again, I've taken parts from MRI. I've taken parts from Tony Robbins, RPM, David Allen, getting things done, and I sort of have my way of doing it. I have my Kolbe quadrants or Eisenhower matrix, urgent, important, not urgent, important, those 4 boxes. So I have that planned out. What do I need to do today? I then get that onto my schedule, right? And then I just follow along my schedule, okay? This is what I'm doing from 9 to 10, okay? And I set an alarm, boom. Sometimes I'll extend it, sometimes I won't. All right, here's 10 to 12, all right? Today I had to shift things around, right? Because I knew I was doing this, right? But again, it's on the calendar. I moved other things off the calendar. So yeah, that is my plan. Then weekly, right? I go through again what I want to accomplish the next week, and monthly, the next month, and quarterly, and yearly. And one key piece, again, this is straight from Tony Robbins' RPM, Rapid Planning Method. Don't start with to-do list, right? What is your outcome, right? What is that, shining star, the northern light, the compass? Where are you headed? What is the outcome that you want? Once you know that, and it's a SMART outcome, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-bound, why do you want it, right? You're going to run into roadblocks. There's got to be days you don't want to do it. But with that juice, that purpose, it'll push you forward. It'll make you, work 14 hours a day. It'll make you just do whatever it is that you need to do to accomplish it. Now you have your outcome, your purpose. Now you got your action list, to-dos, whatever you want to call it, your massive action plan. And now you can start executing, right? But you got to know where you're going first.
So often I have conversations with recruiters, and that is one of the questions. I was like, where do you want to go? And that's like what I'm thinking, like, what's your dream? And, it really is like, so often I just tell people like, you need to sit down and figure it out. Like you need to spend some time figuring out what you want to do. But okay, curiosity.
Or even on a day, like, why am I making these phone calls, right? Why did I email that person, right? Why is this call on my schedule, right? What's the outcome I'm trying to achieve? And is there a quicker, faster, better way to get there?
Okay, I'm excited about this question. you've spent a lot of time around Tony Robbins. What are some of the biggest things that a recruiter can learn from Tony Robbins and like the Tony Robbins trainings that you've gone through?
There is so much, right? I mean, I've been involved there 17 years, and a lot of it is ingrained in me. I was having a conversation last week when they said, did you just use NLP, right? Neuro-linguistic programming. Like, I have no idea, right? I've been trained in it, but it's, part of who I am. And all Tony's teachings and trainings have become part of who I am. But, it's the way you see the world, the way you process information, knowing what you control and what you don't control, accepting reality, right? It was raining when I walked here, right? Did I want to rain? No, but it is raining. So what did I do? Right? I took an umbrella, right? That's just a silly example. You got to turn down in recruiting, okay? The world isn't over. It's reality. Figure out what to do next, right? Accepting the facts on the ground, right? And creating a plan as to how to go forward. So whether it's, Tony Robbins or Danny Cahill, or you listen to your podcast or Mark Whip or whatever it is, right? You got to feed your mind with the right, and I'm sort of rambling here, with the right information, because if you don't feed your mind, right, somebody else will, whether it's the news media or your friends or the people you call that are, rude to you, you got to feed your mind proactively before others do. So yes, you can learn from Tony Robbins is do what you know you should do. All right, so let's go with that. Do what you know you should do. I've been around Tony for a long time, and I see people coming to events again and again and again, and after 10 years, they're not 10 years into it, right? They've had 1 years, right? Because they don't do what they know they're supposed to do, right? So that's what I would say. Do what you know you're supposed to do.
Ooh, that's like a powerful take right there. Because I've seen it over the years. I've seen it with my own life. I've seen it with other people. Like you go to an event and you get hyped up and pumped up. And then a week and a half later, you're sitting in front of your desk and you're sitting there looking like, do I need to make the decision to pick up the phone? Am I going to make the decision to send this email? Am I going to make this video? Man, do it. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. I've been there too, right? And I'm still there on some days. What I will say though is the time, right, has, whether in the past they would take it, I'd procrastinate for an hour. Now it's like, all right, 3, 2, 1, go, right? And I forget the woman's name as the book. I think it's 3, 2, 1, go. She has the podcast as well. But yeah, so I still have those thoughts and feelings, except now I'm like, get out of here. And I just do it. So I trained myself.
I think that this right there, the last 5 minutes is the absolute takeaway from this podcast. So like real quick, if you're listening to this, hit the rewind button 5 or 6 times so you can play that over again. The advice that he got, really just the impact from Tony Robbins in the recruiting world that Brian just shared. Like, I think we can almost finish the podcast up right there.
I'm going to rewind it too because I have no idea what I said.
In that note also, like you've had a lot of success. You've had a lot of up and downs. You've been recruiting twice. You've been around all these peak performance training structures. What's the biggest things that you see that recruiters are typically not doing or failing with that's keeping them from succeeding?
Not training their mindset as much as they train their skill set, right? I think you need to train your mindset just as much, if not more, than your skill set, right? Because whatever your skills are, your mind's going to get in the way. So yeah, train your mindset.
Awesome. And with all these people that you've coached over these years, like you're the one I know asking all the questions. Is there a question that you always wish they actually asked you?
The question they don't want the answer to, right? The question they're afraid to ask themselves, right? Because once you ask that question and you start peeling away the layers, you get to the real raw truth as to why they're not doing what they say they want to do, right? And we all have somewhere in our life where we're not where we want to be, where there's a gap, right? And you want to close the gap. But until you're calling it tight, right? Until you have the absolute raw truth, you're never going to close that gap because you're telling yourself a story, right? And that's what I think holds most people back. The story you tell yourself about why you can't have what it is you say you want.
How does somebody, like, maybe not in a coaching program, break themselves down to figure out what that raw truth is so they can start
journaling? If they're just, by themselves out of coach, journaling, right? Journal the question and keep going deeper and deeper and deeper and understand the difference between a fact and a story, right? A fact is something that happened. It's the absolute truth, right? Story is you create around the facts as to why it happened. Well, it doesn't matter. Stick with the facts as to why you didn't work out when you said you did, why you didn't pick up the phone when you wanted to. Yeah.
I feel like I can keep on asking you questions on this for like the next 45 minutes or probably the next 3 hours or so, but we're gonna jump ahead.
Folks, I cleared my schedule. There's nothing on it, right? It's flexible, right? That's another thing. You have to leave some flexibility in the schedule. I didn't know if this was going to run late, stop early, tech issues, who knows? So you have to build that flexibility into your schedule.
What has been one of your favorite things about working with Tony Robbins?
Raising my children in that environment, right? So my kids, my adults who are now, don't kill me if I get this wrong. My daughter's going to be 26. My son's 23. They have been in that environment since I think 14 and 11, right? So they have been raised in that environment. It takes a village. They were raised by the fire team village. So there was a 6 or 7 year period where I took my kids out of school 4 times a year and we traveled the country with Tony Robbins, building the fires for the fire walks he does at his Unleash the Power events. And so, yeah, they did that for 6, 7 years straight. And that has built within them resilience, toughness, the mindset, teamwork, leadership, so many different great things that I think, not that they're better than their peers, although I think they are, they just see the world, differently than someone their age who did not grow up in that environment and have the responsibilities that they had and the experiences and teachings that they were privy to.
So curiosity, when it comes to firewalking, what is the purpose of going across the fire?
To prove to yourself, right, you can do something that you think is impossible. So when we get them out there, you're looking down at 2,500 degree coals. And can you curse on this podcast?
Yes, you can.
Right. And you say, there's no fucking way I'm walking across that. Right. And then you do. And then, you look back like, holy shit, I just did that. Right. So what other story are you telling yourself about why you can't do something? No, I can't, make those phone calls. No, I can't, have that amount cash in. No, I can't make that number of places. So it's all a story. Right. And it's just a metaphor, right? Whatever story you create in your mind about why you can't do it, you just walked across 2,500 degree coals, right? And it doesn't mean you're not going to get a hot spot in your foot, right? So in the real world, you're going to stub your toe, right? You're going to get hurt. Yes, but you got to keep going. And in all my years, there's never been one person that stopped while they're walking across the hot coals, right? You go, and if you get a hot spot, you just keep going, right? And whether you get a hot spot or not doesn't matter. The fact is, you took that step. You owned it. You said, I am going to do this. So whether it's in business or in health or in asking the person out, whatever it is, that's all. It's a metaphor for whatever story you tell yourself to hold you back, you can break through. Same thing as a board break.
I was going to ask you if anybody's ever actually stopped in the middle of the coals, but you answered that one. And
no one has ever stopped in the middle of the coals.
And then I was also going to ask you, how a recruiter can utilize that. And you just went straight into there and nailed that answer. So you kind of killed that one for me. Good job, Brian.
Sorry.
You also mentioned NLP.
Hmm?
Do you think NLP is something that recruiters should learn how to utilize?
I think recruiters should learn how to utilize any tool or skill that can help them, right? Okay. And NLP is a great tool. It's just a language of the brain, so a simple, easy example is when you're talking to someone, right? Hey, Benjamin, imagine when you're working at that firm, right? Picture yourself there and what it's going to be like, right? I'm having you create that image in your mind. Just little tricks like that, right? Is part of NLP.
Maybe I need to do a whole NLP podcast episode, but it's, we're recruiters, we're such great storytellers, but what you just said is imagine yourself. It's not just a storytelling, it's now storytelling the future.
And it's having them see it actually happening, right? What do you think it'll be like when you're over there? See yourself over there, right? See yourself working with them, see where your career is going. And that's just one. That's if they're visual, right? if they're auditory, right? How would it sound, right, if you worked at that firm, right? And you have to figure out if they're auditory, or visual or kinesthetics, lots of different ways.
Oh, yeah. I think you have now made me go back, and I'm going to think of a way to do an entire episode on NLP and recruiting.
I can tell you who the best NLP practitioners are offline, and we'll put you in touch.
Let's do that. Well, before we jump over to the quickfire questions, is there anything else that you want to share about like a second career, like in recruiting, or the second time around, jumping back into recruiting, or just like what you can learn from all the stuff that you've learned from Tony Robbins, your own coaching program, and how actually recruiters can be better?
So I'll answer it this way. We had talked about lots of legal recruiters are attorneys, right? And the lawyer personality is, I would say, if not diametrically opposed, close to the personality needed for recruiting. When I was practicing, I was a hot commodity. I was in demand with no marketing, turning away business, right? My identity was strong. I was significant. I'm a powerful attorney. And now I am cold calling and cold emailing, attorneys 20 years my junior who are not responding to me, right? So it's a different mentality. You have to make sure that the identity that you had is not as an attorney, because then you'll sink, right? The identity has to be as a human being, a father, a business leader, a mother, a parent, a servant, whatever it is, because it's a big shift from one to the other. And there's all these studies, by Dr. Larry Richard, the lawyer brain. Attorneys are not resilient at all, right? They don't like being challenged. As a recruiter, well, you better damn well be resisting, because you're getting challenged all day long, right? So it's a different skill set. So if you're going to do it, just be fully aware of what you're getting yourself into.
I've been having conversations all week with people, and I just get conversations behind the scenes about identity, actually.
Yeah.
And
identity is critical.
And it's so often like our identity is attached to something, like being a lawyer or, working at this job. But it's like really figuring out how to craft your identity. That's part of it, but that's not everything.
Because if you lose that identity, if you're no longer practicing law, right, what happens now? Do you have no more self-worth? Are you not worthy? Well, no, right? So you have to be careful with the identity, because people will do anything humanly possible to remain consistent with their identity, right? So if you are an athlete, right, you'll do whatever it takes to be an athlete. If you consider yourself a couch potato, right, you'll do whatever it takes not to work out, right? It's whatever the strongest phrase in life, I am blank. Whatever you put after I am, you will make happen. So just be very careful what you fill in that blank with.
If you're listening to this podcast and you're actually not running or at the gym, write down on a note card, I am, and then put the next words in. And actually, take it one step further. Shoot it to myself and Brian. I'd love to hear what you are either building your identity for, building it towards, or just what you are as a person. Man.
And the next step, we'll keep going, is incantations, right? Once you have your I am statement, right, you have to incant it out loud, right? So your subconscious picks it up. So writing it down is great, but you want to get your whole body involved, right? So I am worthy, I am successful, I am loving, I am whatever it is for you.
How many times a day do you have to should you be saying this before it really becomes to your core? I know you also talked about how often that you're putting good stuff in your head.
Yeah, all the time, right? In the morning, there's a specific, things that I do to get my mindset ready. Throughout the day, I'll get myself pumped up. I have a rebounder that I'm jumping on, right? To get the blood flowing. Yeah, you just have to be very careful what you allow into your world.
And I think for anybody going, this will be the last thing before we jump over the quickfire questions. Going into between now and November, there are so many opportunities for you just to be distracted.
Mm-hmm.
And if you focus on putting the right things in your head, focus on putting in the work, focus on doing some of the things that Brian was just talking about doing, you can really stand out as a recruiter for the rest of this year. So jumping over to the quickfire questions, I'm going to enjoy these. Advice to a brand new recruiter that's just getting started in our wonderful industry this year.
Turning pro. I mean, that's what I would say, right? From day one, if you treat this as a profession, like a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant, you are a recruiter. You are a professional recruiter, and treat it like that.
Same question, but for people that have been around the block 5, 10, 20 years, or maybe even their second time around like you are. What advice would you give to them to see success?
Same thing. And if I had to add something, we touched on it because, again, what I do, you got to feed your mind. You got to work on your mindset as much as your skill set. Even to this day, right? I am constantly working on building up a positive mindset, mentally tough, resilient, because I know what's going to happen during the day, right? And I could have the greatest skills in the world. I could have the gift of gab, the golden tongue, whatever you want to, the ability to influence anybody. But if one person shoots me down and I'm not resilient, it doesn't matter, right? So you got to keep working that mindset. You've had a bunch of people on here who say the same thing. I mean, Brent Orsuga, Julia Arpak, the hockey player who's a professional, I forget his name.
Dominic?
Yeah. So yeah, you had a bunch of them on there.
And it's kind of funny. You've also mentioned Mark Whitby's podcast, The Resilient Recruiter. I asked him, I was like, the name, like Resilient, like your podcast. And he's like, this is exactly why.
Yeah. Mark's a great guy.
I love Mark. Shout out to Mark. All right. I know you were ready for this one.
Uh-oh.
What book has had a huge impact on your own personal career life?
Aha. Too many to name. But what I did is I was walking to my offices. I grabbed a bunch off the shelf. So here we are. We're going to go. All right. So starting off with an oldie but a goodie, how to win friends and influence people, because nobody really cares about you. All they do is care about themselves. So you have to make sure, right, you are focused on them. And just one little interesting thing, I pulled out the bookmark here, which was a New Jersey transit receipt. But the interesting part is, I don't know if you can see, it's dated March 22nd, 2008, right? So that is, I guess, when I first started reading this book, and I've kept the same bookmark in there as I reread it over the years. Next one, Stoicism. I don't know if you or your fans are familiar with Stoicism, but Marcus Aurelius, Meditations, right? And one of the things I do when I read is I mark up the pages, I take notes, I put little stars. So one of the big things from Stoicism, Marcus Aurelius, is you could die right, one of the quotes, you could die right now. So let that guide what you say, do, and think, right? We're not guaranteed to make it to the end of this podcast, right? So let that guide what you do, say, and think in this moment and every moment forward. Yeah, so Stoicism is really powerful. Ryan Holiday has a great set of books on that. All right, next set of books. We talked about Turning Pro, Stephen Pressfield, right? So his books, The War of Art and Turning Pro. So The War of Art was also really important to me. As an attorney, there are external deadlines, right? I need to meet external deadlines. As a recruiter, contingent recruiter, I have no external deadlines. Like I said, if I show up, don't show up, nobody knows, right? This sort of helps from an art perspective, which recruiting is an art, right? Help you wrap your mind around the war of art, the war you go through every day, creating your day to go forward, the war you go through mentally to be able to do what you do. So that was good. And then we talked about turning pro, becoming a professional. And then I would see the most badass coach out there. And I was grateful enough to take a coaching program with him in a group environment is Tim Grover. I don't know if you know, so he had his books Relentless and Winning, and it's all about obsession. My favorite thing when people say, what's the one thing that I should do? Tim Grover says, no, there is no one thing. There's everything, right? There is no 7-minute abs, right? There is no one secret to success. You have to do anything and everything to achieve your goals. So I highly recommend Tim's books, Relentless and Winning. There is nobody in this world who knows more about winning than Tim, having coached, all the greats he's coached. And that's just several of the many books that have had an impact on me.
Tim's amazing. Man, Steve Pressfield's books, if you want a ass kicking, my God.
Yeah.
Some of those books will rip you open and show you the real life in a good way,
Yeah.
And it's, every person that reads every book, you always get something different out of it. But yeah, all great stuff.
And when you reread that, right, you can read them again, right? And, you are in a different place in your life when you reread them. So you'll see and feel something different when you go through it the second time, learn something different.
So you just mentioned Tim Grover talking about there isn't one secret to success. Mm-hmm. And one of my next questions always is what do you think has been a major part, aka a secret for your own personal success over the years?
So it would have to be starting out, being at the lowest of the low, after my divorce, getting involved in Tony Robbins and being exposed to this whole world out there of, Tony and Tim Grover and Stephen Pressfield and Marcus Aurelius and Stoicism, to consistently put myself in environments and around people who are just playing this game at a level much higher than me, so I can strive to be where they are, right? It's just, creating the environment for yourself where you can thrive, right? Again, that's the key, creating it for yourself, because no one's going to create it for you.
How'd you end up in that, in the world of Tony Robbins?
So after my divorce, I went through what I call the death spiral.
Yeah.
And my kids will see this at some point, so we'll leave it at that. But whatever I was doing wasn't working, right? Tried lots of different modalities. Then I was driving somewhere and I heard on the radio, I mean, there hadn't been internet back then. Yeah, this is 17 years ago, so whatever that was. He was going to be in Orlando, right, doing an event. So I'm like, all right, let's go. So drove up there. He wasn't even there, right? This is during the time where he was doing, movie theaters and renting conference halls and hotels with a facilitator and videos. And I'm like, this is for me. Plunked down my credit card, bought the next level. Just the information, but the environment and the people that I met that day were the people I wanted to surround myself with. And it just happened. So I got lucky hearing it on the radio, and boom, here I am 17 years later.
Okay, so you heard it on the radio, you went to a thing, you bought a course, but you didn't just buy a course, you went and found a way to get involved. How did you do that?
Okay, so after I did the event in Orlando, I bought his next level was Master University. And once you attend an event and go through it and graduate from that event, you can then volunteer at that event. It's called crewing, right? So after attending UPW, I went back and crewed, which is you volunteer to help people, right? From there, I moved on to the fire team, which is the team that builds the fires that people walk on. It's like the Navy SEALs, the elite special forces that jump in, build the fire, and leave. That was one track. And the next track was to become a trainer, right? There are other required courses you must take. You go through a leadership program. There's different levels before you are promoted to trainer. There's a few different levels before you can get promoted to trainer. And I think I was promoted about 7 years ago. So yeah, it's one taking the courses, right? He likes when you take his courses, pay him the money for the courses. That helps, right? But once you go through them, right, you have to check the box on certain skill sets, right? You are being evaluated the whole way, right? As to whether you check the boxes on the skill sets that they are specifically looking for. And then if you do, it's like any corporation, you get promoted up the chain of command in the ladder.
I had to ask, because, there's so many people that go buy a course, but at the end of everything is after buying that course. And you've decided to go also, outside of your recruiting, outside of you doing mergers and acquisitions and major deals and, placing lawyers, you're also helping people become better themselves.
And I still attend events. 2 weeks ago, he did an event at the Palm Beach County Convention Center, and I paid to attend as a participant, right? So I get it. The learning never ends.
So we're going to jump from learning to the hard days. And we've talked about the hard days. We talked about being pro, but how do you make it through those tough weeks?
So exercise is a big part of it, right? Journaling, knowing that tomorrow will be better, right? Understanding what's in my control, what's not in my control, accepting reality, right? Not everyone wants to work with me, right? Not every attorney to say, hey, you know what, Brian? Yes, let's do a deep dive and you can say to this firm. Not every law firm is going to want to, give me a job order or an engagement fee. It's understanding the world and how it works and accepting reality and moving forward and being grateful that, I'm sitting in this chair today because plenty of people are underground who are younger than me.
Mm-hmm. And this goes into my favorite question. We're going to kind of maybe ask this two ways. We're going to ask this when you first started recruiting, when you first bought the MRI franchise, and the second time you jumped back in. But with everything that you know now, the trainings, the books you've read, the ups and the downs, the pain, the success, if you can go back and give yourself advice at the very beginning of your recruiting career when you first bought that MRI franchise, what advice would you give yourself?
So way back when, the first time would have been everything's going to be okay, right? That was just a blip, right? Because again, it wasn't the best environment, back then when I just got divorced, right after I purchased it. But I guess getting out of your own way, getting out of your own way, right? Doing what you're supposed to do, right? I think that all ties in together, getting out of your way, knowing what you're supposed to do. and stop creating those bullshit stories in your head that stop you from getting what you want to get.
And same question, but let's fast forward a few years to when you jump back into recruiting and you have things a little more figured out, you have more success, you enjoy it way more. Is there some advice that you would give yourself on your second time around?
I'd say it's the same thing, but reinforce it even harder. Because now that I've been around a while and have had some success, you can get lazy, right? But you can't, right? Because there's somebody else out there who is calling my clients, calling the attorneys that I'm working with, right? So it's the same thing. Stop telling yourself those BS stories, feed your mind, build that mindset, do your incantations, prepare yourself for the battle you will face, every day. And again, I still have that, right? Like I said, what I've been successful in doing is shortening the time of the pity parties.
Love that. Well, Brian, before I let you go, if somebody wants to follow you, how can they go about doing that?
LinkedIn is the best way. I post, probably Monday to Friday. I tend to take the weekends off unless something hits me, right? But LinkedIn is the best way to find me, best place to find me.
Awesome. And before I let you go, is there anything else that you would love to share with the listeners?
I think we covered a lot. And again, I'm excited to go back, because again, while I had my outcome for this podcast, I've been doing a lot of rambling and I'm interested to hear what I said.
I had the entire focus of making this like a focus on a conversation of second career professionals and the impact that they can do. But then we just went down the rabbit hole of success principles. We went down the rabbit hole of like the mindset and the things that you need to do. So I am not going to lie, I'm grateful for this episode and I'm super excited to actually listen to it again, like once it goes live. But man, if you got a chance to listen to this, you enjoyed the conversation, make sure to go follow Brian on LinkedIn. Okay. And most importantly, put in the work because I want 2024 to be your best year yet. Keep crushing it, guys.